Hello and welcome to this webinar for AmeriCorps Vista members. This session is called Building a Digital Ad Campaign. I'm Andy King, Training Specialist with the Corporation for National Community Service, located in Washington, D.C., and I'll be your host. Here's what we hope you'll get out of this webinar. By the end of the session, we'd like you to be able to identify the components of a digital advertising campaign. Also that you'll be able to create effective content for Facebook or a Google ad, that you'll be able to perform basic A/B split testing to improve your return on investment. You'll be able to optimize your landing page so that you're using your ad budget effectively. And finally, we hope that you'll be able to measure your campaigns and to use the results of your measurement to adjust the campaigns going forward. And I'm excited to introduce to you our presenter for this session. Jeff Rum is the founder and CEO of Ignite Digital Strategy Group in Bethesda, Maryland. An award-winning digital strategist, educator, and public speaker, Jeff has nearly 15 years of experience in digital strategy, branding, and marketing. He has served as a digital consultant with the White House, the United Nations Foundation, and a host of national nonprofits, foundations, and associations. We're delighted to bring Jeff's expertise to you, our Vista members. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you now.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. It's always a pleasure to be with the AmeriCorps Vista program. Before we dive into the session, let's take a moment for a quick chat activity, if you don't mind. Before the session, we posted the question about what kinds of things your organization might want to advertise. So now that we're all here, let me ask it this way. What would your organization create a digital ad campaign for? Or why would your organization create a digital ad campaign? Please enter your ideas in the chat panel, which is to the right of the slides. If you don't see the chat panel, look in the top right corner of your screen and click on the speech bubbles of the icon and type in your response and make sure you send to all participants.
All right, so Jeff, we've got a lot of responses coming in already, and some themes are starting to emerge here. Some of them are about awareness for the organization or a particular program that the organization is offering, creating awareness or promoting the group. Others are more specific about recruiting volunteers or recruiting participants for programs that are being offered, getting the word out about the services that are being offered by the organization. And then another big category I'm seeing is around donations, doing a fundraising campaign, getting donors to support particular events or projects, but doing that fundraising.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more popular areas that people want to focus on. It's also one of the more challenging ones when it comes to creating a digital ad campaign, but we'll get into that shortly. Great. Well, thank you all for participating in the chat. We can move to the beginning slide here. So you all had some great responses to that question. To summarize, here are the most common reasons for building a digital ad campaign. As many of you mentioned, just increasing visibility about your organization and the work you do. Oftentimes, organizations want to use digital advertising to reach new audiences, so the people they're not currently reaching. Another way, and I think someone had mentioned, getting people to participate in a survey or being able to use it for a feedback form. You can use an ad campaign to listen to your audience, which is not always the first thing that comes to mind, but it's a great way to get feedback. And finally, which is what I see a lot of organizations doing, is using digital advertising to promote specific events, different campaigns, especially those related to fundraising and other campaigns. So those are the most common ways that I've seen organizations using digital advertising to build out a campaign and get to their audience. A digital strategy for nonprofit organizations, for instance, is used to accomplish three things: recruit volunteers, gain donors, and build organizational or mission awareness. You may have several campaigns running to meet these goals as part of an overall digital strategy. So before creating an ad campaign, you need to have an overall digital marketing strategy in place. And in an earlier webinar, I discussed the steps to creating a strategy that are listed here. So here's just a brief overview of the steps to create a digital marketing strategy. The process starts with your organization's why. I call this the 10,000-foot view, the overall goal that you want to accomplish. It then moves to defining the audience you want to reach and create specific personas that embody each segment of your desired audience. And from there, you map out what the journey would look like for each of your audience members, what interactions you want them to have with you, and what you want them to do. You'd essentially set up a calendar that plans out what information or content you would deliver to your audience and when that would happen. You'd create a budget to ensure that you have all the resources you'll need. And finally, develop a plan for measuring the results of your efforts. So in a nutshell, that's the overview of steps that we discussed at the last webinar. If you want to go more in depth on these topics, you can watch the on-demand version of the webinar. It's called Creating an Effective Digital Marketing Strategy, and you can find it on the Vista campus with the other webinars for Vista members. Okay, so what are the steps to build a successful advertising campaign? Number one, you want to identify the campaign objectives. What exactly are you trying to get out of this? Each objective is going to have a goal. And then you want to select key performance indicators for each one of those goals. You'll need to identify the targets and the metrics and determine segments for analysis. And we're going to get into all of these throughout the webinar today. But these are the general steps to build an effective campaign. So step one, let's go into identifying campaign objectives. Identifying the business objectives mandates a discussion, or sometimes multiple discussions, with the senior leaders in your organization and working with them, right? So we want to identify why the campaign or the initiative exists. So here are just some examples. The objectives might be to create awareness, to grow a database of names, or to highlight or promote key events. Step two, we now want to go a little bit deeper. Identify goals for each objective. So drilling down to identify campaign goals requires some critical thinking from both the management, potentially any marketers that you have on your team, and analysts, essentially people that are going to be able to understand and use that data. And you want to do this with management in the leadership role if possible. So my definition, goals are specific strategies you'll leverage to accomplish the objectives that we talked about earlier. So for example, if your goal is to grow your donor database or your volunteer database, the goal would be to capture specific email addresses. So let's move now to step three. We want to drill down to identify the goals, and that requires, lots of different critical thinking, as we mentioned before. But the KPIs, those are, specific, we call them key performance indicators, but ways that you'll be able to measure the effectiveness of each one of your goals. So, for example, I mentioned before growing the database, and one of the goals would be capturing email addresses. The KPI for that goal would be the conversion, right? So how many email addresses were you able to capture for the subscription? Let's say it was for an email newsletter, for example. So having these objectives kind of at the high level, creating specific goals for each of the objectives, and then the KPIs, which you're able to then measure. To me, those are really important factors for each one of these. So let's look at some sample key performance indicators. So here are some sample KPIs. I encourage you all to think beyond the expected ones, right? I hear a lot about, measuring clicks or page views. Those are easy to pull from a report, but they don't often directly connect back to your goals. So I prefer to think about more meaningful KPIs, like, loyalty measures the full engagement of a user. Someone who visits your landing page isn't as loyal as someone who visits the landing page, then signs up for your email newsletter, and then perhaps down the line makes a donation. So loyalty, for example, measures the success of this whole process. Conversion rate is the average number of conversions per click on an ad, for example. It's shown as a percentage. So the higher the conversion rate, the better your ads are performing. And task completion is just that. Did the user complete the task? Did they sign up for the list? Did they register for an event? Did they share content? So these are very much more specific KPIs that, again, directly go back to your goals. And finally, something like offline attendance. Did the user actually attend the event after seeing the ad for it? This is an example of a digital advertising KPI that has a specific offline component. So next, we'll want to identify targets. So my definition, targets are numerical values you've predetermined as indicators of success or failure. So why do you need targets? So consider this. You had an amazing campaign on YouTube. Let's say you created a great video for your organization, and you got 1.2 million views. So is that great or is that awful? How do you decide? That is why you need targets, right? So what does that actually mean for your organization? And targets can come from historical performance, so how you did the last time, or another organization that did something similar. They can come from other efforts. If a 1 hour long video can get 30,000 views in a week, should your 2-minute, much peppier video get 1 million views or more? If you have no targets, then really you have to make something up. You have to use a number that, if reached, it won't embarrass you or your management. You need a starting place. You can revise the number the next month after you get some data, but you need some place to start. And what's important is that you never measure without having some sense of what good or bad performance looks like. And the more experience you have with this, the better you'll get at setting targets, good targets. So that's just a place to start. But having targets are going to be really important for you to, again, measure the success and be able to monitor how well you're doing with the campaign. So the final step is to identify segments for analysis. So it's kind of heartbreaking for me how few people complete this step, because I think it's so absolutely critical in many different ways. So the last part of identifying segments is particularly meaningful because of its incredible value. So, my definition of segments is a group of people, their sources, their on-site behavior, and outcomes. So when you log into Google Analytics, for example, or any other data source, there's so much data. You're kind of deluged by the data, and you can go in so many different directions. But remember, we not only want focus, we want hyper-focus. So identifying the sources of traffic or the types of people desirable, their attitudes or their attributes, their behavior, the things that they care about most, and what they are coming to the site to accomplish. These are the things that you want to look for. So, again, going back to our example of growing your database of people, that's one of the reasons why you're creating this, this ad campaign. you know, your segment would be the site tools that are particularly used for measuring this. So now that we've talked about the steps, let's go in and talk about creating a key message for each campaign goal. So each campaign goal needs a key message. For example, if your goal is to grow your email list, your key message should have some focus on this goal. And remember, each audience may have a different message or a different ad within your campaign. The next slide. Today we're going to look at two different types of digital advertising. There are many more out there, but we're going to look at pay-per-click, also known as PPC, which stands for pay per click, and social media advertising. Specifically, we're going to look at Facebook, but a lot of this can apply to other social media tools as well. So this is always a big question, you know, drafting up your budget for your campaign. How much should I be spending on a digital ad campaign? So really, I think about this in two answers. Number one, start with a test budget. You can roughly calculate your test budget by multiplying the number of keywords you want to test for a campaign and by the cost per click and by a minimum of, let's say, 100 clicks. So as a general rule, you want to get at least 100 to 200 clicks on a keyword to determine whether that converts for you. So for example, if you're going to test 10 keywords with a cost per click of $1, we'd recommend you plan a budget of $1,000 to $2,000. Most likely you'll have a mix of winning and losing keywords, ads and landing pages from an initial test. As you see results come in, you can prune your campaign, keeping the winners, dropping those that weren't performing as well, to bring your campaign to have a greater return on investment. So number two would be to focus on the return on investment, not necessarily the cost. So if you want to be a kind of a savvier advertiser, you don't want to just focus on managing costs. You want to focus your energy on maximizing that return on investment from the advertising. So for nonprofits, it's not as simple as if you were selling a product necessarily, but you should ask the question, how much are we willing to spend to reach our goal of 1,000 new emails, for example, or 25 new volunteers, or 10 new donors? Once you're able to test your campaign and understand the conversion rate, for example, for every 100 ads clicked, we get 10 email addresses. Then you'll know kind of how to budget accordingly. And Google and Facebook have estimators to tell you how much a click or an impression will cost. So that should help you budget as well. You can see the keyword estimator tool from Google AdWords provides you with the estimated forecast in terms of impressions and clicks, costs, et cetera. So you have to do a little bit of digging, but that can help you as well. And Facebook's budget and schedule tool allows you to see how specific or broad your audience is, as you can see from the image on the right, for the particular ad campaign that you have set up, and how many people you should expect to reach in a day. And then, again, this is a ballpark estimate, but how many clicks you can expect. But again, these are all just estimates, but it's a good way for you to understand perhaps how to budget. So now that we've talked about budgeting, let's go into the elements of a particular ad. So your ad will typically need some kind of headline. It's best to limit your headline to just a few words because that's usually what fits in the ad frame. And research shows us that the shorter and sweeter you can get, the more effective typically a headline can be. A good headline is compelling in some way. It hooks the viewer based on their values, their motivations, or their needs. Once you've written your headline, I always like to tell people, like, review each word carefully. Is the word absolutely necessary? What does it add to the overall meaning? Is this going to be something that's engaging? So go to the next slide. Okay. So think about a project, event, or campaign at your Vista site for which you might create a digital ad. And in the chat, give the name of the event and 4 keywords you would use in that ad. Please enter your ideas in the chat panel, which is to the right of the slides. If you don't see the chat panel, again, look in the top right corner of your screen and click on the speech bubble icon, type your responses, and make sure you send to all participants. I'll let you guys do that now.
All right, well, Ryan was the first to weigh in, and now we've got a few more coming as well.
Okay.
All right, so a few different types of examples. Some of them are around actual events. And so we've seen, for example, a summer lunch event that would have keywords like hunger, food insecurity, feeding, kids, and community. Some of the other ones are around volunteer opportunities or job opportunities.
Yeah. The nice thing about Google's tool is once you have some keywords that you've been thinking about that people would potentially type in to get to your ad, Google will also recommend other keywords that you can consider that you may not have thought of. And it'll also tell you the competitiveness of those keywords, which can help you find some new words that you can use as part of your ad campaign. And remember, these keywords are good for you to use in your ads, but they're also good for you to use as keywords where you want to come up. You want your ad to come up for. So helpful in 2 different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen a couple of different approaches that are showing up here in the chat. Some of them are maybe an extension of what is in the name of the event. So the name of the event tells exactly what it is, and then the keywords are things like celebrate, fun, family, community, but they're not really specific to the type of event. And then in others, the keywords are very clear, like veterans, fundraiser, auction, that type of thing that really drill down in the type of the event that's being held. So any thoughts on how to use those keywords?
The best advice I can give in terms of keywords is to just put yourself in the shoes of the user, right? So you want to get people to an event. You know the name of your event. You know what it's about. But what would someone type in if they were looking for that type of event? You know, whether it's a summer concert, if it's a specific geographic location, if it's something that's kid-friendly. So, you know, again, put yourself in the shoes of the user, the person searching, and that will help you think of keywords that might get people to engage in your event. And remember, these are, you know, typically these are people that are not currently involved in your organization. You're trying to reach others as well. So specific is good, but you don't want to be too specific that you're only going to get people that are searching for, you know, the title of an event or something that is very specific to your organization.
All right, thanks for that.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay. So what we have here is what I call the pay-per-click campaign spreadsheet, and you can create this using any spreadsheet tool. A pay-per-click marketing campaign template can be devised in a spreadsheet that helps you organize your search ads for all of your campaigns and ad groups. You can keep track of your Google AdWords or Bing ads or whatever program you're using in a simple Excel spreadsheet. This is good for collaboration and recording for each one. So as you can see here, each of your different audience groups, you can name them if you want, and you can include the particular keywords you want for that audience. Then again, the headline for your ads, the description, and then where you're taking people. So what is that landing page URL? And then you can keep track here and enter, once you've run the campaign, what the click-through rate is. And you can then do a little bit of analysis afterwards to understand which ads for which audience had a higher click-through rate, which ones are performing better. I'd like to do this because it keeps everything in one place. The next thing to understand is making sure, as we mentioned before, that your headline really counts. You don't want to waste the space with purposeless characters. You have limited space, and it's important real estate in terms of your ad. Your headline is the most prominent aspect of a digital ad, so make sure it carries its weight. You have essentially 25 characters of space to take advantage of. So really use that to make a statement. For ads targeting specific keywords, you should consider using descriptive headlines that explain your product or your organization, the service you're providing, or the opportunity you're providing. And for ads targeting searchers on your brand name, make sure to include the organization's name. Now, typically, I would tell folks not to include the organization in the headline for a couple of reasons. One, it's usually in the domain name right underneath, so it's for me, it's like kind of a waste to also have it in the headline, unless for whatever reason you're trying to get people to get to the ad when they're specifically looking for your organization. But I would say probably for most organizations participating on this call, it probably makes sense not to have branded campaigns. Those are typically for much larger organizations, but to really focus it on the campaign that you're running and the specific action that you want people to take. So next, it's important to include keywords in the copy. So this is another helpful trick, to include your keywords in the ad copy as appropriate. This reinforces the relevance of your ad to the searcher and will help them see the value in whatever it is that you're offering them. And Google will make keywords and sometimes even synonyms that are present in your ads, they'll bold them, which can really make it pop and stand out for people. One thing to note is really try to avoid stuffing keywords into your ads. Keyword stuffing looks unnatural and could confuse the message. So make sure the keyword, if you're going to include the keyword, that it's there for a reason and it sounds right to the user. So as you can see here in this example, the keywords are donation for disaster relief, and you could see disaster relief in the top one is in the URL, and donate is in the message on the bottom one. So, and you can see disaster and disaster relief are also included in some of the text and the headlines as well. So all of that helps get the right ads to the users that are looking for it. Next is one of the best ways to ensure that you're getting the best bang for your buck, which is to create and test multiple ads. And this isn't too complicated. We call this A/B testing. You can see which one gets more clicks, and then you can continue with that ad while turning the other ad off. So for example, if you have two similar ads and you want to test, let's say, the headline, you can have two different headlines, run them both on a small budget, a fraction of your total budget, let it go for a few hours or for a certain amount of spend, and then see which one is getting higher click-through, and then you can kind of sunset the other one, and that way you know that the ad that you're running is going to be more effective. You can also do that once you've tested the two headlines, for example, then you can go onto the description in the ad and see if a description works better with the headline that won. So it's just kind of a way to make sure that you're getting the best return on your investment when you're setting up a campaign. So if you've got two ads that have different click-through rates, how can you be sure that those ads perform differently in the long run? There's a free tool that's available by this website called Perry Marshall, and I like to use it because it allows you to save time on doing calculations, and you can enter in your data the different click-through rates, the number of clicks, and the click-through rate. This information comes right from your kind of Google control panel when you're setting up an ad, and it will calculate for you which ad is working better. So that's just one little hack that you can use. There are other websites out there that do this. This is just one that makes it very simple. So I wanted to share that with you all. And next, it's not hard to get a lot of clicks necessarily. I mean, that's what the budget is for, and Google will be glad to spend it. But it is hard to get a lot of clicks from qualified people that are willing and able to become, folks that are going to be involved in your organization. So you want to make sure your ad text qualifies potential audience members and prevents clicks from those who would essentially just leave your site without converting because what you're offering is not right for them. So for example, if there are competitors that are providing, some kind of service, but it's a lot less, the quality is a lot less than what you're offering, you might want to consider touting or talking about the level of quality that you provide in whatever service or volunteer opportunity that you're offering. It may result in fewer clicks because maybe there's more work that someone has to do by going through a lengthier process to become a volunteer, for example. But the clicks you'll get will be from people that are really willing to go the extra mile, and they're probably the right people that you want to reach. So you just kind of want to qualify your quote-unquote customers or the people that you're actually trying to convert in terms of getting new people and new volunteers and new donors or new leads and whatever that means to your organization. So next, it's important to include a call to action in your Google ad. It's amazing how many advertisers I see that fail to include some kind of call to action within the text. This is your chance to tell the audience what they should do once they actually arrive at your site. And I do say from experience, I think it really works. So what is your goal? Do you want to drive people to download a white paper? Are you looking for people to sign up for an event or become a volunteer? Tell your audience what the next step is, and you'll see an increase in the number of them that actually follow through. This goes back to what I was saying before about qualifying. It's also important that you tell people, what they should expect. You also, just as a note, you want to make sure that your website also echoes this call to action. So you don't want people to land on your site to be confused about what to do next. It should be a natural transition from the ad to the landing page. And we'll talk about landing pages in a little bit. So let's talk about the anatomy of an ad campaign. So to see how all the elements of a digital ad come together, Here's an example of a promoted Google ad. At the top is a headline. As you can see, this title includes the website of the organization. And in this case, it helps to distinguish it from others that might come up in the search to, again, give it a sense of credibility in this example. In some cases, you don't necessarily need the website URL. This is a competitive space for pet adoption, so they want it to, they believe that their URL will help with the credibility. Just below that, the title is the destination URL. This is the site where users will land if they click on your ad. By creating a special landing page for your ad, you can track how many people come to your site because of the ad, and then you can even see what actions they take once they reach your site. And you can do this by making sure that you have any type of analytics installed, such as Google Analytics, and that will help track the user from clicking on the ad through to your site. Here is, below that, is the text or ad copy. Basically, it's the short line or few lines of text that appears in the ad. Just note that the keywords that appear in the text are automatically bolded by Google. And then finally, as we talked about, there are calls to action at the bottom of the ad. A call to action is what you want your audience to do. And you can see in this example, they have several. So adopt a pet, take action, donate, and education. Each call to action is a separate link that could take users to a different part of your website or to a special landing page you create as part of your campaign. But typically when I tell people to start these, if you're starting out with a digital ad campaign for the first time, is to have one clear call to action that directs people to one specific landing page. So this is just one example of how all the elements of a digital ad come together in what users will see in the search results. I could pick this apart and critique it a little bit, but I think it gives you a general understanding of the foundational elements and the anatomy of what an ad would look like. So we're going to go into another chat activity. Please enter your ideas in the chat panel, just to right of the slides. How could this ad be improved? I don't know if it's a little bit hard to see on the screen. So this is to get your heads out of a nonprofit organization for a moment. So you're all now marketers, and you're experts in digital advertising. And someone's looking for forward-focused brakes. So tell me, what are the issues here? And again, please enter your ideas in the chat panel, just to the right of the slides. If you don't see the chat panel, look at the top right corner of your screen and click on the speech bubble icon. Type in your response and make sure you send, again, to all participants. So someone's looking for forward-focused brakes, and this ad comes up.
So we've got lots of responses coming in. People are correctly noting that a Mazda isn't a Ford, and someone who's looking for brakes for their Ford Focus may not be interested in buying a new car. So it seems like perhaps that the ad needs better keywords so that it will come up when someone's searching for maybe for a Mazda or a new car.
Yes, your responses are all great. I like to use, this is a fun activity. And, think about it. When was the last time you went looking for a $35 pair of brake shoes and you were convinced to upgrade to a $21,000 car instead? So it might have made sense. Maybe if they targeted forward-focused brakes, but even that's a stretch for getting people to purchase a vehicle. So you know, I would say that even if you have a lot of money in your budget, I wouldn't throw away money like this, right? This is just bad ad targeting, bad, you know, poor use of keywords. There's no way that Mazda should be using its budget for keywords that are really, you know, people not looking. This is someone looking specifically for Ford Focus brakes. Likely they need it for their Ford Focus. So it's clear that there's a lot going on as people are mentioning. So it's hard to believe this ad is getting clicks for this query. So all it's doing is dragging their relevance, and probably, you know, it's not helping their overall campaign. Okay. All right. So you might be thinking advertising on Google sounds expensive, and I don't have a budget to work with. So are you wasting your time on this webinar? Hopefully not. And actually the answer is no. There is something called Google Nonprofit Grants, and they are available for eligible nonprofit organizations. I've worked with many different types of nonprofits who have been recipients of nonprofit grants from Google. As you think about the best ways to use the Google Ad Grants, here are just a few guidelines to keep in mind. Number one, your ads will be entirely text-based. There's no, they don't allow you to use video or images in these using this grant money. They'll also appear only on Google search results pages in positions below the ads of paying advertisers. All campaigns must be keyword targeted, and your maximum cost per click, they max it out at $2 per click. And you receive, if you get awarded this, you receive $10,000 of in-kind AdWords advertising each month. You can actually get up to $40,000 for something called Grants Pro participants. It's actually not that difficult. You just have to go through, you fill out a form online through Google Ad Grants. They do request some information, but as long as you're smart and thoughtful in the answers and your organization is eligible, it's a great opportunity for you to start with advertising using Google. So I would highly recommend it. And you can go to google.com/grants and check it out. There are certain types of organizations that are not eligible. I won't go through that on the phone or on this call, but most 501c3s are eligible. So something to think about. Okay, so now we're going to switch from talking about pay-per-click ads on sites like Google for people who are searching for keywords and such, and instead look at ads on social media sites. So for simplicity, we're going to use Facebook as our example. So Facebook offers a wide variety of paid ad options and placements, but all ads can be broken down into 3 elements, essentially. Essentially, think about it as your campaign is on top, like these are going back to your goals and what you're trying to do. And then if you have different audiences, and each audience may have different characteristics, you'll need an ad set for each of those audiences. And then within the ad set, you may even have a few different types of ads, and each ad set can hold a variety of ads that have different copy or images. And this goes back to what I mentioned before about doing some A/B testing. You may want to do that within the ads. Within the ad sets, having different ads that you can run and see which ones are working better than others. So the first thing you want to do is choose the objective of your Facebook ad campaign. So Facebook gives you options, as you can see, and you have to kind of figure out which is the best one for your campaign. In this case, and in many cases, especially if you're sending people to a web page, we'll choose clicks to the website as the campaign objective. So the next piece of this is selecting your audience. And to me, this is the real key to success. Audience, audience, audience. You have the ability to target audiences specifically based on geography, based on age, based on language, based on areas of interest, different topics, user behaviors. This makes sure that you are sending your ads to the right people, having them show up in your target audience feeds. And this, to me is as I said before, the most important piece, because if you're targeting your ads to the right people, you're more likely going to get those people to actually do what you want them to do. Facebook custom audiences, this is an advanced feature that enables you to connect on Facebook with your existing contacts. So it may be worthwhile for you to get in front of your existing volunteers, audience members, donors, and it gives you the opportunity to, increase the engagement that you have with them over time. And you can also increase the efficiency of your campaigns and avoid wasted clicks by excluding your customer list. So in one sense, you may want to upload your list because you want to drive home the message. Maybe they received an email, but you want to kind of keep hitting them, and you want to reinforce a message, whether it's an event or a campaign, and hopefully those people will then share it with their networks, and their networks will see if they comment, like, or engage in a particular post. On the flip side, you may want to run a campaign where you don't want your audience list to see it, and therefore you can not waste your budget on those people that you're already engaged with. So there's lots of different ways to do this. Custom audiences are created by uploading your customer or your audience phone list or email list. You could do it in a CSV or a text format, and you just upload it right to Facebook. There's a tool where you can do this. And you can create a custom audience based on your site visitors or on specific actions taken within your page. So there's lots of ways to create a custom audience. Again, this is an advanced feature if you want to either push a message or post to an audience that you already have, or make sure that you're not showing it to those people as well. And then lookalike audiences are a logical next step. So once you have good custom audiences, a strategy in place, even if you don't have your own email list, you can mirror your Facebook fan base. Lookalikes allow you to expand beyond your reach, but still target people with highly specific profiles by creating audiences that look like your own target. So if you don't have a list or a big enough Facebook following, you can still create a lookalike audience. And once you've decided which audience you want to replicate or expand on, you can make the audience larger or smaller, depending. So it's another interesting way to try to directly target people using Facebook. So what's the best way to think about creating an ad for Facebook or any other kind of social media network? There are a couple of things I like to tell people up front. One is identify engaging visuals. You want to find visuals that will be appealing to people. There's lots of research out there and data that shows on Facebook, and certainly there are networks like Instagram and Pinterest, those that are strictly visual. But visuals are a way to get people engaged in a post, much more than just writing copy. However, you want copy that will then inform, inspire, or delight people in addition to the visuals that you have there. And finally, you want to include a clear call to action as needed. So assuming you have some really great visual design, some copy that is going to inspire people to do something, you want to have a call to action to tell people what to do. And then you want to create your ad. So what do you want your ad to look like? It all depends on your objective. Going back to where we started today. If you're looking to increase the number of clicks to your website, Facebook's ad manager will suggest the click to website ad option, so that makes sense. And this ad option is broken down into two formats. There's the links and carousels. Essentially, this means that you can either display a single image ad, which we're calling links, or a multi-image ad, which is also called a carousel, with 3 to 5 scrolling images. And this doesn't cost you anything more. It just means that you need to have more visuals. So a link ad would look like this, the one that you see in front of you from Kiva. There's some text and a visual image, and they're asking people to change their profile picture to support refugees. So that's an example of a call to action. There's some text, a nice image, and that's an example of a link ad. And then here's an example of a carousel ad. As you can kind of see, you can click to move it, and we're going to show you just an animation here just of like what it could look like. So you don't have to just use visual, but you can overlay copy on top of the visual to tell a story. And that's a great way to use Facebook or any social network advertising, is really to tell stories and to get people engaged through visuals and through that kind of storytelling that you can do with something like a carousel. Next, something that's very important, in my mind at least, it's important to look at each ad and see what your results are. So how many people are you reaching? What's the cost? How much are you spending? Are you on track to meet the goals that we set earlier on? Facebook has an easy reporting tool that shows you the status of your campaign. You can use the information in the ads manager to see how your ads are doing and if they're getting enough engagement. So it's easy to make changes also at any level of the campaign. So if you see that something's working or not working, you can update the targets, you can update the audience, you can update the budget very easily within the ad manager that Facebook has. Okay, so next, it's really important to look at your landing page. So if you think about the process that a user is taking, you can have an amazing ad with great visuals, great storytelling, a call to action. You get people jazzed up, they click on your ad. The next phase of this process is equally as important, perhaps even more important, because this is where you actually want someone to do something, if you are in fact taking them to a web page. This could be where your form is. This could be where your donation form is. This can be where the sign up is for an event. It could be a video that you want people to see. So there are really important elements here that you need to have in mind. So here's kind of a template of an effective landing page. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these right now. Number one is you need to have a really good headline that's short and descriptive, and it should reflect, again, the headline that someone clicked on. Doesn't have to be exact, but people should know that when they click to the ad and got to the landing page, that they see it feels like a natural transition to them. Perhaps you want even a secondary headline to give the reader an even better sense of what they'll learn. Perhaps some descriptive text, anything that you want them to do, a call to action, and a really easy way for them to know where to click. You may want to include some testimonials from people. So, even if it's a donation page, why not have a testimonial from a donor that's already made a donation and why they give? Or a volunteer, why do they volunteer? You want to make sure that you have some kind of engaging visual. And at the top, you see number 7. We have links if you want people to be able to navigate throughout the rest of your website. And finally, you want to make sure that your landing page is mobile accessible, so that, you know, we know that typically more than 50% of users are going to a web page from their mobile phone, and especially if you're running a campaign on a site like Facebook, the numbers are probably higher. You want to make sure your landing page is accessible and easy to navigate on a mobile device. So those are just some important elements to keep in mind when you're creating your landing page. Again, it's equally as important if you're trying to take people to this page to do something from your ad. So here's another example of an effective landing page. And as you can see here, there's a really strong title, a form that's very easy. So it's just four fields and a question. You want to keep forms as short as possible. And the button tells people exactly what they're getting. You can download the guide. There's some additional benefits outlined underneath, but it's sharp, it's to the point, it's very clear what people are going to get when they complete the form. So you want to keep all of those elements in mind when you're creating your landing page. So before we wrap up, let's look at this chat activity. How could this landing page be improved? Take a look at the landing page. Tell us what you think could be improved. Enter your ideas in the chat panel, which is to the right of the slides. If you don't see the chat panel, look at the top right corner of your screen and click on the speech bubble icon. Type your response and make sure you send to all participants.
All right, well, we've got a few responses coming in. There's a lot of text, and the text is really small, so making it hard to read. Let's see, the image doesn't represent much diversity in the photo.
Yeah.
Let's see, a lot of folks have those same kinds of things. The photo isn't really engaging. You can't quite tell what it's telling you. Yeah, someone pointed out there's no subtitle, so there's just this kind of this title and then a bunch of text.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not clear where we're supposed to look first. It's dull. There's not a lot of color.
Yeah, these are great comments. I mean, it's interesting. I see a lot of people focusing on the image, which shows you how important the image is. And again, knowing your audience, like what are they going to respond to? Who is your audience, and is this the right image for them? So I think all the comments about lack of diversity, the image isn't very interesting. I think all of those are really helpful. It looks like a stock image. All these comments are good. There's no, yeah, someone just mentioned, is there a better call to action than contact us? There probably is, and it's not clear what they want people to do here. So I think that's a really good point. It's not welcoming. Yeah, there's a lot of text there. There's been I used to do a lot of eye tracking studies, and a lot of we see that people read in kind of a Z format. So starting with the top left, going across, down the middle, and then down the bottom. And in this case, it's not really, you know, there's no real intention behind, it seems, behind where all the content is placed. Okay, good stuff. So in conclusion, first of all, thank you all for being on this webinar today. I really enjoy doing this, and I hope you all learned something. And I always like to tell people, like, don't ever forget the goals, right? So you can get caught up sometimes in looking at the data and the analytics and working on your landing page and creating really beautiful ads. But don't forget why it is you're creating this ad campaign to begin with. A lot of nonprofits have limited budgets, so you want to make sure that you're spending your time and your resources wisely. So, you know, always go back, point back to those goals and make sure that whatever you're doing and creating in terms of directing ads to your organization, that you're remembering the goals and that the work that you're doing on these ads are actually going to help you achieve those goals. So here are a couple of resources we mentioned during the webinar as you work on your digital campaign. Just as a reminder, our mentioning a resource does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by the AmeriCorps Vista program or the Corporation for National and Community Service. If you haven't already, you can take a look at the webinar I did in March around creating a strategy, where we go into more detail about goals, developing personas, journey maps, and creating a content calendar. Steps you should think through before you implement any type of digital advertising campaign. Hopefully you'll find these to be useful. And before we close, here are a few things you can do to start thinking about a digital ad campaign. So number one, determine the goals for the ad campaign, define your audience, create ads for your audience, review the landing page and make sure it's effective, and finally, of course, set a budget that's realistic and that you'll be able to manage. So as I mentioned before, I hope you learned something new today and started some ideas flowing. I want to thank you again for participating in today's webinar, and I hope to see you again on another one.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. A lot of information. You've given us so much to think about. And I'm sure we've generated some questions along the way, so we're going to get to the Q&A in just a second. But before we do that, I want to point out we have an evaluation poll that's opened up on the right side of the screen. We really do care what you think, and the best way for us to provide you with webinars that meet your needs and share the kind of content you're interested in is for you to tell us. There are 10 quick and easy questions. You'll need to use the scroll bar to get to all of those questions, but if you would take a moment, we really do look at all of your responses to those. So I want to thank you. And now let's move into the Q&A. So as I mentioned, we've given you a lot to think about, and I know we've already generated a few questions, but we want to use the rest of our time together to give you a chance to ask a question if we've not already answered it. I think you know that you can use the WebEx Q&A feature. When we opened the poll, the Q&A panel closed, so you'll need to click the little triangle next to the letters Q&A to reopen that and send your question in. And I'm going to ask Ashley, our operator, to come back on and give us instructions for those of you who are on the phone.
We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your request, press *2. One moment, please, for the first question.
All right, and while we're waiting for questions to come in by phone, we have a few that have come in already. And let's see. So the first one is, how can I better market our program to reach more people? In Dylan's program, they offer GED classes, English classes, and they offer training to get certified in certain in-demand careers, mostly in the medical field. So, Jeff, thoughts on what they could do to reach more people through marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what we spoke about in terms of targeting. I think that one thing you can do is talk to the current students and understand a little more about who they are, and you know, try to create some personas and some audience groups based on what you've learned, and then you can target audiences that look like them. So then you could be targeting the same type of people. You'll probably find that there might be common themes that you learned from the students that are currently participating in your program, and then you can target specifically ads that are to the audience that you're trying to reach. So that's one way to do it, whether it's on Facebook or using Google for people searching for specific programs like the ones that you're offering. So I think the targeting is going to be really important there, because you don't want to, again, you don't want to waste your budget on getting your ads in front of people that are not necessarily the right people for your program.
All right, thanks for that. Our next question comes from Gray, who sort of on a similar topic but going in a different direction. He says, I understand the importance of targeting your audience to get more engagement, but what do we do if we're trying to bring in people who normally wouldn't give a second thought to our cause?
That's a tough one. I mean, I guess I would ask the follow-up question is, well, why wouldn't they normally give a second thought to your cause? Are they truly the right people that you're trying to reach? If you need, it sounds like there may need to be a level of education first. So you may have an issue that, you know, I guess what you're saying is there aren't people that necessarily even know to care about it. So it might be educating them, and that goes back to what we said before around like creating strong visuals. A video is something we didn't really talk about much in this webinar, but I found that creating a short video, just from an educational standpoint to get people engaged in an issue or a cause can be really effective, and you can promote that video on social media the same way you would promote an ad, you know, a digital ad. So that could be a way to expand the type of people you want to reach, because you may be able to engage them through a different type of medium. But it's hard. I mean, this stuff, I should have said this at the beginning, like this stuff is not easy. To try to engage people through a digital ad, you know, it's challenging. That's why I like to test different ads to see what's working, especially when you're trying to get people to give you money. It's hard. So you want to try to think of the best way to engage those people. So you might want to think about video as a tool for education and engagement, and then once you capture those people, then you can start to, you know, feed them more detailed information and ask them to do something.
All right, thanks for that. Let's see if we have any callers on the phone with questions.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and please record your name clearly when prompted. One moment, please, for your first question. And I am showing no questions queued up at this time.
Okay, well, we'll check back in just a couple of minutes. And also as a reminder, if you want to ask a question through the WebEx Q&A, if you don't see it, look just above the poll and you'll see the letters Q&A. Click the little triangle next to it. That will reopen your Q&A panel. Our next question comes from Eva, or maybe it's Ava, who asks, are there ways to target people who are living within a specific geographic area? Our organization only works with people in St. Paul.
Absolutely. Both in Facebook and in Google, you can target very, very much geographically. I mean, down by specific areas. You can create radiuses, so you can pick a central location and then build a, I think it starts at a 5-mile radius around that area. And I would say if you are a local organization, you definitely want to target, the first thing you want to do is target by geography, because again, you're then really hyper-focusing on the people that you want to reach. So you don't want your ads going out to, if you're in St. Paul, you don't want your ads going out to someone in Houston if they're not going to be relevant to that person. So absolutely, you should definitely target, that would be the first thing I would suggest if you are a local organization with, with a local purpose, to target geographically. And then you can start to get into more specific characteristics of your audience within that geographic target.
All right, great, thank you. Well, I'm showing no other questions here in the Q&A. Ashley, do we have anybody on the phone?
I still am showing no further questions.
Okay, so let me see. Earlier on, a question came in that I responded back, but just for everyone, earlier, Jeff, you talked about conversion rates, and you gave a quick mention about what that could be, but just for everyone's benefit, if you wouldn't mind just giving some other examples of what you mean by conversion. So if someone's got an ad out there and they want to have some outcome to measure, what should they look for in terms of conversion?
Yeah, so conversion could be anything, any type of action. So a conversion could be someone completing an email registration form or an email newsletter subscription form. It could be a donation. It could be, that's a conversion. You may view a conversion as someone who views a video because you feel that was your goal, is to get them to watch a video, and then therefore hopefully they will be impacted by the content of the video. So the conversion really is how are you going to measure the action versus the number of people that actually clicked on an ad, and that can be tracked in many different ways depending on what the actual end task is. So we had mentioned before around that the tool that you can use to track in multiple ads which ads are working, and the reason to do that is to know ultimately which ads are giving you the higher percentage of conversions. So if your conversion rate is 5% on one ad, but it's 25% on another, that means you're getting 5 times the number of clicks on the second ad. So that's probably the one that you want to run more frequently. But a conversion is really any action that you deem as measurable that goes back to your goal.
Great, thanks. We do have another question. It came in from Marley. Are there any advertising platforms that you would recommend that we should stay away from? Ones that may be too much effort or there's not a good return on investment?
That's a good question. I would say that that you want to stick with probably for the majority of people on this webinar, is you want to stick to the native advertising platforms. For example, if you're going to advertise on Facebook, then go to Facebook. If you want to advertise on using Google, go directly to Google, because there are a lot of networks or platforms that disguise themselves as they're going to get you on thousands of websites, and essentially all they're doing is probably upcharging you for what it would cost for you to go to the native platform. Now, if you're a very large organization and you need to go with a platform so that everything can be managed and you have a vendor or a professional who's going to be managing that, that's one thing. But I would just try to just stick with the one or two platforms, the native networks that you're going to use, and go directly through them, because there's a lot of junk out there that I can't even list them all because there's so many. So I think your best bet is to go directly with the native platform.
All right, great. And let's see, Catherine says, I've noticed for lower income communities and limited English-speaking communities that word of mouth is often an effective advertising tool. Is there a way to measure this? So it gets a little off the track of digital ads, but can we measure word of mouth?
It's a great question, and it's actually, I'm glad that someone brought it up, because sometimes digital ads are not the answer. And this is the business I'm in, but I think that it's fair to say that in some cases, in different communities, word of mouth may be a better way to get more people engaged in something, or a combination of that with digital advertising or other advertising. How do you measure word of mouth? I think that you can measure it by around events. So if you're advertising, or if you're running an event but you're not doing digital advertising, but you have a group of core participants, and your goal is, let's say your goal is to get each of them to bring 5 people, technically that's word of mouth, right? So you're able to then, quantify that. You can also create a survey. You can do this online or offline. A survey, there are plenty of survey links that you can add to your website, where if someone, many of you may have seen this yourself, you go to a website, a little survey pops up and says, would you mind answering a few questions? Those are typically third-party tools that are overlaid on your website, and you could ask, how did you hear about us? And word of mouth could be one of the answers. You could also do this offline by surveying people that are attending an event or a conference, or when people call in, you can ask them, and you can note that somewhere so you have that data. It's very hard to measure word of mouth, but these are just some ways to think about doing it. It's a great question. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And Ashley, one more time to check on the phone.
I still am showing no questions at this time.
Okay, great. And let's see, one of our participants, Erin, shared a suggestion with everyone to be sure to check with your organization or your supervisor before you would start an ad campaign. Some organizations would need to go through a particular process of approval or clearance, and there may be a higher level organization that would want to weigh in. So good advice always, that you'd work very closely with your VISTA supervisor before you would launch anything publicly. All right, well, I think that wraps it up for this session. I want to thank everyone for the questions that you asked. They were really thoughtful, as well as for all your participation on the activities during today's session. Before we leave you, I want to again thank our presenter, Jeff Rum of Ignite Digital Strategy Group, for preparing and delivering this session. I also want to thank our producers, Bethany DeSoblin and Joanne Lau at Education Northwest, and as well as thanking Ashley, our telephone operator. We hope you will join us for another webinar in the future. Our next one coming up is on July 25th, and it's called Strategizing Your Funding Search. This is Andy King. I'm with AmeriCorps Vista. Thank you all for being with us.